In the last 4 hours, record 22.2 million need humanitarian assistance in Yemen. In the last 6 hours, Yemen humanitarian operation explained at Saudi meeting. 9 killed in Saudi-led airstrike in Yemen. Residents. 9 killed in Saudi-led airstrike in Yemen. Residents. Yesterday, humanitarian response plan in Yemen launches for year 2018. Saudi-led Arab coalition launches a major humanitarian operation in Yemen. Yemen photojournalist killed in a rocket attack. Al-Jaber and Al-Malki explain aspects of humanitarian operations in Yemen. Jazan port to take delivery of goods for Yemen. Yemen humanitarian operations to create job opportunities. KS Relief provides shelter aid for the displaced. In Marib, Germany halts weapons sales to Saudi Arabia over war in Yemen. At least 9 civilians killed in new Saudi airstrike on Sada. Yemeni ambassador to Turkey meets with advisor to Turkish president surviving Yemen's war in a rubbish dump. KS Relief distributes 7,500 food baskets. In Misrik Directorate, Yemen. 7 issues that will shape the humanitarian agenda in 2018. Saudi airstrike kills more Yemeni children. Insider exclusive interview with Congressman Ro Khanna on U.S. interventionism. Saudi Arabia endorses $1 United States and 50 cents BLN aid package to Yemen. Houthi attack on Yemen's Tariz base kills 11. The world's worst humanitarian crisis by the numbers. Malaysian armed forces to provide humanitarian assistance in Yemen. Death of a leader. Where next for Yemen's GPC after murder of Salah. Russia welcomes Arab coalition's humanitarian measures in Yemen. Malaysia welcomes reopening of Yemen ports to ease humanitarian crisis. FM takes part in Saudi-led coalition meeting on Yemen. Germany halts arms exports to Saudis. Others at war in Yemen. Opinion. 7 issues that will shape the humanitarian agenda in 2018 as Yemeni rial is in free fall. Worst may be yet to come. In the last 7 days, Saudi-led coalition announces $1.5 billion in new aid for war-torn Yemen. Coalition to give $1.5 billion in aid for Yemen. UN Yemen envoy to step down next month. Top UN mediator for Yemen steps down. Arab coalition allocates $1.50 BLN for Yemen humanitarian operations. Saudi Arabia, UAE contribute USD BLN to humanitarian aid in Yemen. Saudi-led coalition plans to give $1.5 billion in Yemen aid. Expand port capacity. Yemen suffers deadly strikes as Russia calls for dialogue to resolve crisis. Coalition to give $1.5 billion in Yemen aid. Expand port capacity. Presidency director meets United Nations resident representative. Arab coalition stresses humanitarian aid to Yemen. Yemen's forgotten war. Locals tell their story. Saudi Arabia pledges $1.5 billion in Yemen aid. Suffering in silence. The 80 million people you might have never heard of. Houthi rebel fire kills 9, including journalist. In Yemen's Tariz, Arab coalition launches humanitarian process in Yemen. Yemen rebels fire rockets at military parade, killing 4. Yemen, the world's worst humanitarian crisis in numbers. Saudi pact to grant Yemen $1.5 billion. Saudis pledge $1.5 billion in new aid for Yemen. King Salman Relief Center launches housing project in Yemen. Yemen's revolutionary president bids farewell to UNOCHA coordinator. Human Rights Watch. UAE commits torture in Yemen. Saudi blockade destroys Yemen's ailing health system. UN aid partners launch largest humanitarian appeal for Yemen. Saudi-led coalition announces $1.5 billion in new aid for war-torn Yemen. Yemen obstacles and pathways to peace. UN calls for nearly $3 billion in humanitarian aid for Yemen. UN calls for $3 billion aid for Yemen. Arab coalition to give $1.5 billion in Yemen aid. Arab coalition to gives $1.5 billion in Yemen aid. Saudi-led coalition announces $1.5 billion in new aid for Yemen. Saudi-led coalition to give $1.5 billion in Yemen aid. Expand port capacity. UN aid partners launch largest consolidated humanitarian appeal for Yemen. Saudi-led coalition to give $1.50 BLN in Yemen aid. Expand port capacity. UN appeals for $3 billion in aid for Yemen.